my influences for pots, they're not very direct really. I remember seeing fantastic English medieval pots and being very excited by those, very simple forms. And I think in my functional ware that we've been making over the years, they're very simple forms. And I think the reason I'm drawn to that is because the surface of the soda glaze is so dynamic that too much decoration for me, you don't need to decorate it, it decorates itself. Or the fire does that. I'm not terribly accurate and precise about things. It's not to say I can't make things the same, I can. But, you know, I prefer to respond to the clay itself or to the piece itself as you go on, you know. I don't want everything the same. When I first saw some of the pots in Japan, I kind of really couldn't understand them. Some of them incredibly wobbly and half collapsed sometimes. This is a national living treasure, this piece. How is that? But I think it took me some time to really absorb that and see how special those pots were. And there's one particular pot that has never left my frontal lobe. It was a shino pot, tea bowl, made by Toizo Arakawa. With the most incredible glaze on it. It was a white, sugary glaze with this red coming up, if you can imagine it, underneath the glaze itself. So somehow you could see this red underneath the white, and yet the white was quite thick and sugary. It just blew my mind, you know. It was just such an amazing pot. And I think it wasn't necessarily the form, it was just the whole thing together. And that really got me hooked on shinos. These wonderful colours, some of them incredibly quiet with just little red edges and things. I just thought they were incredible. And that really appealed to my sense of simplicity in the way that I do my glazing. You know, you're using very, very simple materials, just clay, just a slip, which is just clay, you know, and two types of clay mixed together, and then the fire. And it's how you fire them that makes them interesting and creates the colours that we get. And the combinations of that, it makes, I can't tell you how much of a difference it makes. I don't want to really replicate Japanese pots or Japanese glazes, but I'm heavily influenced by it, obviously. And, you know, so it's just trying to find your own voice. And of course, I fire them in a soda kiln, so it gives them a completely different look. And it's, you know, it's just quite incredible, actually, how, you know, just doing something in the firing will make a complete difference to how the end product comes out. You know, it still amazes me, really. When we add the soda, it's a long period of spraying soda in for 3 hours at a time, 2 of us usually, to get in enough. And that has to circulate around the kiln. I've kind of always been quite keen on experimenting with that. Different ways of finishing the firing, different ways of introducing the soda, different ways of reduction at certain periods. And I think if you look through my body of work for the exhibition, actually, that you'll see, you know, there's difference, the same glaze, but because I've fired it differently, it's completely different. Some of them are really lustered, some of them are quite matte. Completely different ways of firing gives you what is basically slips and a shino reacting in numerous different ways. You know, I've always been blessed with a fair amount of energy. You know, it's a pretty hard life sometimes, you know, working that hard. And, you know, I often used to work 7 days a week. The thing about having good pots is using them in your everyday life. It's half the pleasure, really. You know, of course, we start with the mug. And I think even people who don't buy handmade mugs will often have a favourite mug. So you're making decisions about what you choose to eat your cereal out of, be it, sadly, I hope it's not IKEA or one of those things, but you know, you're making a decision about the size, the form, what's comfortable when you're half asleep, you know, what do you want to drink your tea out of and eat your cereal out of. And I think when you buy handmade pots, you can get such a lot of pleasure out of that. Those sort of things are important in life, actually. I recently bought a tea bowl in Korea. Wow, I just remember sitting there looking at it on the shelf and just seeing the way the rim turns over. And maybe somebody else wouldn't have noticed, you know, but for me, the softness of that rim on that tea bowl just made that pot. And that came home with me. It's little subtle things that affect me, and I try, you know, I might try and put that softness of rim. I'll never achieve it the way that he's done it, but it'll be there in my mind when I'm making something. I might remember that. So it's not very direct, my influences. When you're making something large, or even it doesn't have to be large, but you know, there's something about letting the clay respond to itself. And I think you're never going to see it spinning around on a wheel anyway, but to see an edge slightly off-centre, it's much more interesting actually than it's sort of looking at something that's absolutely perfect. For me, that's true in pots. I think it's not true of everything, but I think in pots, for me, you know, I want to see something with a bit of energy, a bit of life to it, and keeping it so it's kind of it's got its own spirit, really. I think you run the risk, I think, with that kind of thing, though, is to, you know, some work and some don't, and it's knowing that when everything comes together, when the firing comes together and the glazing comes together and the making comes together. Some of my best pots where the glaze actually isn't perfect, it's been a sort of a happy accident, it's chance really, and equally with the making too, you know, things that I've just done and thought, oh, that's interesting, I'll leave that. You know, when those things all come together, you know, you get a real special pot, real spirited pot, and that's the kind of pots I aim to make. You know, I hope to achieve in my life. You know, even if I just make a few, I'll be happy.